Hi, I'm Nate. I'm 33 now. But for most of my life, I was the black sheep of my family. Not because I was wild or rebellious, because I was different. Because I had undiagnosed ADHD, and in a house built on perfection, discipline, and high expectations, I was the flaw in their blueprint. My older brother, Mark, golden child, straight A's, top university, never made a mistake. He was everything my parents wanted and everything I was reminded I'd never be. I wasn't lazy, I wasn't stupid, but when no one understands your brain, even your best feels like failure. And for years, I believed them. Hi, I'm Nate. I'm 33 now, but to really understand what happened at my granddad's birthday and why it became the single most cathartic moment of my life, you'd have to go way back. Back to the days when I was just the invisible kid living in the golden shadow of my brother Mark. Mark was the blueprint, the favorite, the prototype for everything my parents valued. Perfect grades, piano lessons, leadership roles, polished shoes, polite voice. If he got a B, it was because the teacher made a mistake. If I got an A, it was finally. He was the chosen one. I was the cautionary tale. My parents were both high-achieving academics, tenured professors at respected universities. To them, intellect was everything. Discipline was sacred. Results were a form of morality. The smarter, sharper, and more successful you were, the more you deserved love. Mark fit into their world like a glove. I didn't. While Mark was reading Shakespeare at age 12, I was still mixing up left and right. I struggled to sit through a class without zoning out. I forgot things, homework appointments, even birthdays. I'd lose pencils within minutes of buying them. I'd procrastinate until the last possible moment and still somehow forget what I was supposed to do. Of course, no one knew back then that I had ADHD. Not me, not my teachers, and certainly not my parents. To them, I was lazy, undisciplined, disrespectful. They'd lecture me for hours. Why can't you just focus? You need to be more like your brother. Do you think success is going to come from playing video games and daydreaming all day? I heard variations of those lines almost every day. Mark didn't help either. He wasn't just the golden child. He knew he was the golden child, and he made sure I never forgot it. He'd correct me in front of guests, mock my messy handwriting, tell me I was embarrassing him. Once in 8th grade, I failed a math quiz, and he told me flat out, "It's like you're not even trying. I wouldn't claim you if we weren't related." And maybe the worst part, I believed him. I honestly thought I was broken, that something was wrong with me, that I was, in my dad's words, the kind of son people whispered about behind your back. It's hard to explain what that does to a kid. When your whole childhood is one long comparison, one long echo of not enough, you learn to disappear. You learn to shrink yourself. You laugh less, talk less. Eventually, you stop trying at all because what's the point? No one notices you unless you screw up, and then they really notice. My birthdays were proof of that. Every year, Mark had these big parties with themes and decorations and gift bags. All the neighbors came. There were photos, speeches, even slideshow presentations of his achievements. Me, I usually got a stack of educational books wrapped in recycled paper and a slice of dry cake. Once I asked my mom why we didn't invite anyone for mine, and she said, "Well, you haven't really done anything worth celebrating." I still remember how cold that felt. Like she hadn't even thought about how much that would sting. Or maybe she had and just didn't care. The sad thing is, I still tried. I tried to win their approval. I joined clubs I didn't care about, took advanced classes I barely understood, studied until I fell asleep at my desk. But no matter how much I tried, it was never enough. By the time college applications rolled around, Mark was off to an Ivy League school on a full scholarship. My dad gave a toast at the dinner table and called him the future of our legacy. 2 years later, I got into a decent average tier university. Nothing fancy, but a solid school. When I told my parents, my dad didn't even look up from his laptop. He just said, "Well, at least you'll be out of the house." And I think that was the moment something broke in me. That cold indifference, that dismissal. It wasn't disappointment, it was rejection. They weren't just disappointed in me, they were ashamed of me. That night, my mom told me we really hoped you'd prove us wrong. But I guess not every child turns out well. She didn't say it in anger. She said it like it was a fact, like she was reading off a receipt. I left for college with zero help from them. No money, no advice, no hugs. Just a one-way bus ticket and a box of ramen in my suitcase. I paid my way through college with loans and a part-time job at the campus IT desk. It was hard, really hard. I struggled to manage my time, stay organized, balance everything. But it was also the first time in my life that I started to feel like maybe I wasn't the problem. A friend in my psych class noticed how I'd zone out during lectures and forget assignments, and she gently asked, "Have you ever been tested for ADHD?" I laughed at first. Isn't that just for hyper little boys who can't sit still? But she explained it. Showed me some articles. Symptoms: executive dysfunction, time blindness, emotional dysregulation. It felt like reading my autobiography. Suddenly, everything started making sense. A few months later, I got officially diagnosed. I sat there in the doctor's office holding the report in my hands, and for the first time ever, I felt relief. I'm not lazy. I'm not stupid. I'm not broken. I just have a different brain. That diagnosis changed everything. Not overnight, but slowly. Through therapy, medication, and building the right systems, I learned how to function in ways that actually made sense for me. I built routines, used timers, developed tools that worked with my brain instead of against it. And over the years, I found my way. I grew. I built a career as an AI solutions architect working at a multinational tech firm. I found love, moved to a new city, created a life I was proud of. And for nearly a decade, I stayed away from my parents. No contact, no updates, no family drama. But then, one call changed everything. 9 years. That's how long it had been since I last saw my parents. No emails, no phone calls, no birthday cards, just silence. And honestly, it was peaceful. I had built a life where I didn't have to brace myself before opening a text. A life where I didn't flinch when my phone buzzed. A life that felt mine. Until one afternoon, I got a phone call I wasn't expecting. It was Granddad. Now, you have to understand, my grandfather is one of the few people in my family who's always treated me with kindness. He didn't fully understand my ADHD or what I went through, but he never judged me for it. He never called me a failure. He'd just smile and ask how I was doing. That meant more than he ever knew. He was turning 80 and said he was throwing a big party. "I'd really love to see you there," he told me, his voice warm but a little shaky with age. "I know it might be awkward, but it would mean a lot." I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to see him, but because I knew exactly who else would be there. But something in his voice pulled me in. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was love. Maybe it was the fact that he was the only one who'd ever stood up for me when I was younger. Whatever it was, I said yes. The party was held at a fancy event hall. I showed up in a dark button-up shirt, slacks, and the nicest shoes I owned. I brought a gift and a card, kept my head high. Told myself, "You're just here for Granddad. That's it. Nothing else matters." I scanned the room as I walked in. Strings of lights hung from the ceiling, soft jazz music floated through the speakers, and people were chatting around cocktail tables, wine glasses in hand. And then I saw them. My parents. They were standing near the buffet table, talking to some distant cousins, looking exactly the same. My dad, with his neatly trimmed beard and perpetual frown. My mom, in her signature beige dress, the kind she always wore to things that mattered. I tried not to look, kept walking, found Granddad near the center of the room. He lit up the second he saw me. "There's my boy," he said, pulling me into a hug that made the rest of the room disappear for a moment. "You came? Wouldn't miss it," I said, smiling. He looked me over and said, "You look good, Nate, really good." I stayed close to him for a while, chatting with some uncles, aunts, and cousins. Most of them were surprised to see me. "Wow, it's been forever. Where have you been hiding? You look so grown up." But of course, it didn't take long before the inevitable happened. I was at the bar sipping club soda when my mom appeared beside me. "Nathan," she said quietly. Her voice was neutral, too neutral. "Mom," I said just as calmly. "Can we talk privately?" I didn't roll my eyes. I didn't sigh. I just followed her across the room to a quieter hallway near the bathrooms. My dad joined us midway through, already looking irritated. As soon as we stopped, my mom turned to me with a tight smile and said, What are you doing here? I blinked. Granddad invited me. Yes, but you haven't been to a single family gathering in almost 10 years, she said, her voice still cool but sharper now. And suddenly, you show up to this. He asked me, I repeated. Personally, I didn't want to disappoint him. My dad scoffed. So now you care about family. I looked at both of them. I came to see him. This isn't about you. My mom folded her arms. You should have told us you were coming. It's not fair for people to be caught off guard. Now we'll have to answer questions. About what I asked, about the son you pretend doesn't exist. That hit a nerve. Her face twitched. My dad's jaw clenched. Then he leaned in and said something that, to this day, I'll never forget. You should leave. People can't know you're still a failure. I stared at him. Not in anger, not in shock, in realization. It didn't matter how many years had passed, how far I'd come, how successful I'd become. To them, I would always be the broken kid, the disappointment, the one they'd rather erase from the picture. And for a split second, I felt like that 18-year-old again standing in our hallway with a duffel bag and no goodbye. But then, something in me shifted. I wasn't that kid anymore. I had built a life without them. I had fought for every inch of growth, every paycheck, every ounce of peace. And I didn't owe them shame anymore. So I said nothing. I just turned and walked away. I made my way back into the main hall where laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. This time it was adrenaline. Something inside me had snapped, but not in a reckless way, in a final way. I found Granddad and stood beside him, took a deep breath, then I tapped my glass with a spoon. Clink, clink, clink. The room quieted. Dozens of heads turned toward me. I saw my parents re-enter the room. My mom froze. My dad stopped mid-step. I cleared my throat. Can I say a few words? The sound of my spoon against the glass still echoed when the room fell silent. I felt every eye turn to me. A few people smiled politely, assuming I was just going to raise a toast to Granddad and sit back down. They had no idea. I caught Granddad's eye. He gave me the smallest nod, just enough to say, "Go ahead, son." So I raised my glass slightly and began. First, happy 80th, Granddad. I think everyone here agrees you've been the rock of this family for as long as we can remember. Your patience, your stories, your bad jokes, they've always been the glue. Laughter, light, warm, the kind you hear at a wedding or family barbecue, the kind I hadn't heard in a long time, I went on. It means a lot to be here tonight. Some of you probably didn't expect to see me, and that's okay. It's been a long time. Pause, a few nods, some curious looks. My parents frozen. I glanced at them briefly, but didn't linger. I want to take a moment to explain something, not to cause drama, but because for most of my life, I've stayed quiet. I let other people tell my story, define who I was, and I think I've finally earned the right to tell it myself. Now people were paying attention. You know that shift in a room when polite interest becomes actual tension? That's what happened. Shoulders straightened, heads tilted, conversation stopped completely. I was never the golden child. Some of you know that. Some of you probably don't. And that's fine. What you might not know is why I vanished after college. Why I stopped showing up to family events, why I went silent. I took a breath, steady but firm. It's because growing up, I was told I wasn't good enough. I was called lazy, disrespectful, ungrateful, a failure. My mom took a sharp breath. My dad's mouth pressed into a hard line. I had undiagnosed ADHD for most of my childhood, which means I struggled with focus, memory, deadlines, things other kids seemed to handle easily. I wasn't being difficult. I was drowning. More silence. You could hear forks pausing midair. But my struggles weren't seen as medical or emotional. They were seen as character flaws. I wasn't sick, I was just a disappointment. People shifted uncomfortably. I heard someone murmur, "Wait, what?" My older brother Mark was the star. Straight A's, perfect scores, piano, science awards. And I was constantly compared to him, told I wasn't trying hard enough, that I was embarrassing, that I'd never amount to anything. I looked at the room, not just at my parents anymore. I'm not saying this for sympathy. I'm saying it because for years I believed it. I believed I was defective. I believed that if I failed at something, it was because I deserved to fail. A cousin covered her mouth. Another looked down at his plate. But I left. I got help. I got diagnosed. I learned how my brain works, and I built systems that helped me succeed. I worked through college with no support, held a job, paid off debt. And today, I'm an AI architect for a multinational tech company. I lead teams. I build systems that solve global problems. Now the silence had changed. It wasn't awkward. It was heavy. A kind of stunned, almost reverent quiet. And I've been doing all of this without contact from the two people who should have had my back the most. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I kept my tone measured, calm. I wanted this to land, not explode. My parents told me I was a failure, that I embarrassed them, that raising me was a waste of time. That's why I wasn't at the birthdays. That's why I didn't come to weddings or holidays. It wasn't because I was bitter. It was because I was healing. I looked toward Granddad again. But when you called Granddad, I knew I had to come. You never made me feel less than. You never told me I was a burden. You always just asked, "How are you, son?" And that meant the world. He was tearing up now. I wasn't far behind, but I held steady. And that's why I'm saying all this now. Because I'm done hiding. I'm not ashamed of who I am anymore. And I won't let anyone else be ashamed of me either. I let that settle in the room, then added, "So I just want to say, for those wondering, yes, I've changed. I've grown. I'm doing well. I'm not here to cause problems. I'm just not hiding anymore." A long pause. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then a few more. Next thing I knew, half the room was clapping, some were standing. My cousin Jenna came over and hugged me. Then my uncle. Then my little niece, who had never even heard my name until that night. My parents didn't move. My mom stared at the tablecloth like it could rescue her. My dad looked like he'd aged 5 years and 5 minutes. Eventually, they got up and quietly slipped out the side door. Not a word. Not even a goodbye to Granddad. But the rest of the night I stayed. I danced with my little cousins, took selfies with people I hadn't seen since high school, ate cake, laughed, sat next to Granddad while he opened gifts and told corny jokes. And for the first time at a family event, I felt like I actually belonged. Not because I became someone else, but because I stopped apologizing for who I already was. The day after the party, I woke up feeling like I'd just survived a storm. Not the kind that wrecks everything, the kind that clears the air. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of being misunderstood. I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. I had said what I needed to say in front of everyone. And it was out there now, no more hiding, no more shame. I figured the family group chat would be quiet for a while. I was wrong. By noon, my cousin Lisa had texted me, "That was brave as hell. Proud of you." Then my aunt messaged, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea. You handled that with grace." Then came the calls. A few uncles, some second cousins I barely knew. One even said, "You made me think about how I talk to my own kids." Some were clearly on my side, but not everyone was thrilled. My cousin Jeremy sent me a voice note 3 minutes long saying I had embarrassed the family, especially our parents, and that I should have talked to them privately. "They're old," he said. "They come from a different time. You should have let it go, right? Because being cruel was acceptable if you did it in the 90s. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Not everything deserves a rebuttal. But the most unexpected reaction came 2 days later. Mark called. Now remember, I hadn't spoken to Mark in 9 years. Not since I left for college, not since he told me I was wasting my potential and making our parents look bad. I stared at the screen as his name lit up. My gut said, ignore it. But my curiosity said, let's hear it. So I answered. "Nathan," he snapped, skipping any greeting. "What the hell were you thinking?" "Nice to hear from you too," I replied dryly. "Don't be cute. You humiliated Mom and Dad in front of the entire family. What you think that makes you some kind of hero?" I leaned back in my chair. I didn't say anything that wasn't true. "You aired family drama at a party?" he hissed. "You know how hard they've worked to move on from all that." "They worked to move on," I said, laughing bitterly. "They spent 9 years pretending I didn't exist. I spent 9 years recovering from their damage." There was silence for a moment. "Then you could have talked to them, privately." I tried that. For 18 years. And all I got was shame and silence. So no, I'm not sorry they were finally uncomfortable. He groaned like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "So what, you want an apology now? You want them to crawl back and beg for your forgiveness?" "No, Mark. I want the truth to matter. I want the people who actually care about me to understand why I disappeared. And I'm not going to feel bad for being honest." He scoffed. "You're so dramatic. That stupid word. My parents used to throw it at me every time I cried. Every time I stood up for myself. You're being dramatic, as if my pain was performance." "I'm being dramatic," I said, voice low now. "You weren't even there, Mark. You didn't see how many people came up to me after and said, 'I'm so sorry. I had no idea.'" He didn't reply, so I kept going. "You were always the golden child. You got everything. You never had to question if you were loved. You never had to fight to be seen. You don't get to lecture me about speaking up after being invisible for half my life." "Jesus," he muttered. "So this is just about you being bitter?" "No, it's about me being done." There was a long pause. Then he said the quiet part out loud. "You're making them look bad. Maybe they are bad." More silence. "I'm not going to keep hiding," I said. "And I'm not cutting myself off from the rest of the family just because they can't handle being uncomfortable." Mark snapped back into big brother mode. "You know what, fine. But don't expect anything from them now. You've burned that bridge." I almost laughed. They were the ones who torched it. I just walked away from the ashes. Then I hung up. I blocked his number after that. Not because I was angry, because I was tired. Tired of defending my pain. Tired of having to prove that I wasn't the villain in their version of our family history. Over the next few weeks, I heard more. Apparently, my speech had started something. People were talking. About how my parents always treated Mark like royalty. About how I was missing from photos, stories, holiday cards. About the weird silence that followed any mention of my name. One uncle told my mom, "Honestly, it explains a lot." My dad tried to downplay everything, said I was exaggerating. My mom stayed quiet, which if you know her says a lot. Granddad called me again. He said, "I want you to know I'm proud of you." I wish I'd said something back then. That one made me cry a little. Just quietly. Sitting at my kitchen table, hearing the one voice that had always felt safe finally say the words I needed all along. And even though I knew some people would side with my parents, it didn't matter. I hadn't said what I said to turn people against them. I said it so I could stop hiding. Because when someone calls you a failure over and over, it doesn't just hurt, it rewires your brain. It makes you doubt your instincts, your worth, your place in the world. Speaking up was my way of rewiring it back. After the party, everything changed. Not instantly, not dramatically, but slowly, like ice thawing. I started getting invited to things again. A cousin's graduation, a small backyard cookout, a niece's birthday party. And for the first time in a decade, I actually showed up. At first, people were a little awkward around me. You could feel it, like they weren't sure if they should tiptoe or act normal. But after a few minutes, most of that tension would melt away. I'd play with the kids, help set up chairs, crack jokes, be myself. Some relatives went out of their way to include me. Others didn't say much, but they didn't ignore me either. That was enough. I wasn't looking for a standing ovation, I just wanted to exist in the room without shame. My parents, though, nowhere to be found. They'd stopped showing up. At least to the events they knew I'd be attending. According to my cousin Jenna, they were too busy or not feeling well. But we all knew what it was. They were avoiding me. Or maybe avoiding the fact that they could no longer control the narrative. Because once the truth is out, you can't stuff it back in the box. I started seeing my granddad more often too. We'd grab coffee or take short walks around his neighborhood. He'd tell me stories about my dad's childhood, things I'd never heard before. Some of them explained a lot. "I don't think your father ever learned how to handle imperfection," he told me once. He thought love had to be earned through success. That's how my father raised him. "I'm sorry you ended up carrying that weight." I nodded. "Yeah, I've stopped carrying it now." He smiled. "Good, because it was never yours." About 2 months after the party, I was at home catching up on work when I got an email notification from dad.lastname university.edu. Subject, "I'd like to talk." I stared at it for a while before clicking. It started like this. "Nathan, I'm writing this because I know you've blocked our numbers and I understand why." Okay, that got my attention. I've been going to therapy. I've been trying to understand what went wrong between us. what I did, what I failed to do. Wait, therapy. My dad. The man who once said therapy was a waste of time for people who don't want to work hard. After your speech at the party, I was angry. Humiliated, yes. But more than anything, I was forced to listen. Really listen. To what you were saying, to what you've carried all these years. I sat back in my chair. I won't pretend to understand everything about ADHD or what your childhood felt like from your perspective. But I've started reading, learning, and what I've read makes me feel ashamed. I felt a lump rise in my throat. Ashamed that I called you lazy when you were struggling. Ashamed that I dismissed you instead of helping you. Ashamed that I compared you to your brother like your value could be measured in test scores. He went on, "Your mother and I came from strict families. We thought discipline was love. We thought pushing harder was how you help a child succeed. But in doing so, we missed what you actually needed." I stopped reading for a moment and just let that sit. Because that was the first real acknowledgement I'd ever received from him. The rest of the email was longer. He talked about following my career on LinkedIn, about how proud he was, his words, not mine, and how he knew he didn't deserve a relationship right now. Maybe not ever. But I wanted you to know I'm trying, and I'm sorry. At the very end, he wrote, "Your mother, she knows you've been doing well too, but you know her. It'll take time. She's proud, but she doesn't know how to say it." I read that line twice, then a third time. It didn't excuse everything, not even close, but it was something. I didn't reply, not right away. Maybe not at all. I wasn't sure yet. I needed time. Because while an apology can be powerful, it doesn't erase the past. It doesn't magically refill the birthdays that felt like obligations, or the nights I cried myself to sleep because I thought something was wrong with me. But it meant he'd finally looked in the mirror. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't like what he saw. After reading the email, I went out for a walk. The air was crisp. The trees were beginning to bloom again, small pink and green buds pushing through the branches. I watched a little girl ride her scooter past me and laugh as the wind caught her hair. And I thought, this is what freedom feels like. Not revenge, not justice, not victory. Just peace. The kind of peace that comes when you've stopped asking for permission to exist. That weekend, I went to another family gathering. My cousin brought out an old photo album. One of the pages had a picture of me when I was maybe 10, missing front tooth, crooked bowl haircut, holding a science fair ribbon like it was gold. "Remember this?" she asked. I looked at it for a long time. "Yeah," I said. "I remember being proud of that ribbon." "You should have been. You beat Mark that year." I smiled. "Don't think they ever mentioned that?" She grinned. "Nope, but I remember. And I was proud of you even if they didn't say it." That moment meant more than I could explain. Because the truth is, we don't always need a dramatic reconciliation. Sometimes the real healing comes from showing up, from being seen, from someone, even just one person, saying, "Hey, I remember you. You mattered." It's been 6 months since that Christmas morning, since the paternity test, since the black box, since I finally said everything I'd been holding in for nearly 3 decades. And the truth is, I'm not angry anymore. I'm not sad. I'm just done. Some bridges are meant to be burned. Some families are meant to be left behind. And some doors. You don't close them quietly. You slam them shut and never look back. That Christmas, my sister tried to humiliate me. She thought she was proving I didn't belong. What she actually did was give me a way out. She handed me the match, and I burned the illusion to the ground. Now I live a life I built on truth, not approval. On peace, not performance. On real love, not obligation. And I've never been more certain of one thing. Sometimes the best revenge is walking away, not bitter, not broken, just free. Story 2. The retirement celebration of Thomas Gale, April 15th, 6 p.m. At the end of March, the invitation arrived. The envelope had a light cream tint and was addressed in my Aunt Hillary's recognizable round handwriting. The mail included a personal letter from her, but the writing was official and straightforward. "I hope everything is going well for you, Tracy. Regarding your father's retirement celebration, I'm writing to you. I am the only member of the family who has maintained contact with you, as you are aware. 15 years is a long period. However, I'm hoping you'll think about coming this one time. I'd want to assist in repairing our relationship with Hillary." As I clutched the letter, my hands shook a little. Since that testimony, Hillary was the only family member who continued to communicate with me occasionally, sending me a letter or email, and no one else had been in touch with me personally. I repeatedly read what she had to say. Do I have to go? If I went, my heart would tremble fiercely. It would undoubtedly hurt. Maybe my dad won't even look at me. Neither Kevin nor my mother would accept me. We were separated by a great distance after 15 years of quiet. I could feel its weight without much imagination. On the other hand, this may be the final chance. He was past the age of retirement, and he was eventually resigning this April. I might never get to see my family again if I didn't attend this celebration. I grabbed a pen and sat down at my desk. I wanted to decline the invitation in a letter, but my hand would not move. Why should I continue to flee? There was nothing wrong with me. Since then, I have been on my own road, having testified for the sake of justice. Hillary's remarks kept repeating in my head. I wish to assist in repairing things. For these 15 years, she had been the sole person between me and the rest of the family. I had to respond to her request. I said to myself, just once more. Again. I make an effort to interact with my family, and even if it was the real end of our connection, I could say that I made an effort. I emailed her a quick response the next day. Thank you for your letter, Aunt Hillary. I'll be at my dad's retirement celebration. But Tracy, please realize that this could be the final time. I let out a long sigh after mailing it. My feelings were mixed up. Fear and determination, anxiety and optimism. But there was no going back once I made up my mind. 15 years have passed. It was the corruption scandal involving bid rigging on public projects, misappropriation of funds, and Daniel Anderson, a longtime friend of my father's and a prominent person in the local construction sector. I was a constitutional law graduate student at the time, and I testified on behalf of the prosecution. I carefully recited only the facts when I testified on behalf of the prosecution. However, Daniel was found guilty as a result of those facts. My father was deeply affected by the repercussions. His reputation suffered greatly as his long-standing relationship with Daniel came under investigation. He had to deal with chilly looks from co-workers, extensive media coverage, and questions from the municipal council. Even resigning was discussed, but he battled to clear his name and was able to hold on to his job. His faith was gradually restored over time, and he continued to work for the firm after reaching retirement age. My father refused to even look at me on the day of the verdict. "Why did you betray him?" my mother sobbed. "Your father's life was wrecked by you." Kevin also spit. "You put justice before family, therefore. What has happened to him since then? Do you even know I didn't communicate with them? No birthday calls, no Christmas cards. The only person left in my life was Hillary. I've heard that my father stayed active in the community even after he reached retirement age. He was popular and regarded as a respectable person. For my part, I worked in my Cambridge office in silence, mentoring students and delving deeply into legal study. I made an effort not to think about my family, but I would always remember them. I took great care in selecting my attire for the celebration. A strand of pearls, a white shirt, and a blue suit. Classy. Written without attracting too much notice. I inhaled deeply after glancing at myself in the mirror. I was already planning how I was going to get through the day. Until I got to the motel. The place was already crowded. People had assembled to honor my father's lengthy career, including the mayor, members of the city council, and local business leaders. I moved stealthily to the rear of the room, avoiding the welcome table. I lacked the bravery to reveal my identity. I wanted to remain unseen like an unexpected visitor. Kevin saw me at that point. His face became pale when he saw me, even though he had been talking to some buddies. "Tracy." He approached. His expression was one of disbelief. "Why are you here?" My brother had changed into a totally different person in the 15 years since I last saw him. Aunt Hillary had informed me that Kevin was now employed as a physician. "Kevin," I whispered softly. Our mother suddenly materialized behind him. She froze the once she spotted me. The glass shuddered in her grasp. "Tracy," her voice trembled. "Why who?" The tension was starting to be noticed by others around us. I heard murmurs. "Who is she?" "The daughter of Mr. Gale. It's been years since I last saw her." My mother clutched my arm in panic. "We are unable to communicate here. Come on over here." I followed her and Kevin to a more peaceful area of the space. Fortunately, it appeared that my father had not yet spotted me, even though a few people were watching us. "You were invited by whom?" my mother inquired in a low voice that was a little confused and a little angry. "And I said Hillary." Kevin's sigh was harsh. "Naturally, Hillary has to interfere every time." "Kevin." After interrupting him, my mother turned back to face me. "Tracy, your father is unaware of your presence. It will be disastrous if he sees you, don't you think?" I smiled wryly as I spoke. Thus, I remain the unwelcome visitor. Her face contorted in discomfort. Her once beautiful face was marked with deep wrinkles from 15 years. The woman I remembered was still there, but she now had a worn-out, weary appearance. "I'm pleading with you, Tracy. Get out of there before your father notices. It's a big day." I couldn't speak. My mother told me to leave right away after we had been together for 15 years. Aunt Hillary showed up. Tracy. She was standing there with a worried expression on her face as I turned around. "You really did come, Aunt Hillary," she remarked softly, grasping my hand. However, she instantly realized what was going on after glancing at my brother's and mother's heated looks. "Hillary, you brought Tracy here, but why?" In a quiet voice, my mother inquired. "Thomas, would you know?" Hillary interrupted her for precisely that reason. 15 years have passed. How long will we continue to live this way?" She turned to face me and spoke strongly after that. "You have every right to be here, Tracy, even though your father is obstinate. This is a family get-together." 2. My brother and mother appeared confused. I was no longer family to them. Hillary, however, didn't think so, and I was aware that my father would probably immediately throw me out if he caught me. I was an unexpected visitor, attempting to take a deep breath. Nevertheless, I was happy to see my family once more, even though I wasn't welcomed. "What's all this commotion, then?" We pivoted. My father was standing there. When his eyes locked with mine, his face froze. "Tracy," his voice was tight with repressed rage and low. "Thomas, why are you here?" Hillary moved forward. She was invited. "Is Tracy your daughter?" "Daughter." His sneer was nasty. "I don't have a daughter." This family was deceived by that individual. I let out a gasp. My father's first comments in 15 years were as ruthless and icy as a sword. "Dad," with a quivering voice I spoke, "keep your mouth shut. You are here for no purpose." I was silenced when my father held out a hand. Everybody in the room looked at us. The rising murmurs were audible to me. A surge of guilt and grief weighed heavily on my chest, almost choking me. "Thomas, you can't talk to her like that." Hillary objected as well. My father yelled, "Hillary, don't get involved. She is not related." I turned to go. There was no way I could remain any longer. My father then stated something that caught me off guard. "All right, at least remain for my speech later since you're here. It will serve as a suitable lesson in embarrassment." Startled, I turned to face him. He planned to let me remain, if only to publicly humiliate me when I had assumed he would toss me out right away. There was just disdain in his eyes. As if I didn't exist, he turned away without saying anything further and went back to talking to the other visitors. I couldn't understand. I anticipated conflict and rage. But more than yelling ever could this calculating disregard and icy indifference unnerved me. "Are you all right, Hillary?" then spoke softly in a whisper. I believe so. However, why didn't he force me to go? I felt a sinking sensation in my chest. He has a plan. He won't just ignore it. My father took the microphone shortly after. It was his turn to speak. I appreciate everyone's attendance today. With ease and power, his voice reverberated across the hall. He talked about his 42 years of service, including the challenges and successes, and thanked his family and co-workers for their unwavering support. I believed I saw him look at me when he used the term family. However, he swiftly averted his gaze. My son Kevin, who practices medicine in our town and has aided countless people, is someone I'm particularly proud of. And he was obviously staring at me. My heart started pounding. Was he going to give me a nod? I straightened my posture and awaited my father's words. And the shame of our family is here with us now. A swarm of murmurs swept through the space. Dozens of eyes shifted in my direction. My face was emptied of blood. The Morrison family name has been tarnished by one of us. Tracy is that individual. She is nothing like the daughter I claim her to be. She is an embarrassment and a failure. I was having trouble staying upright. His remarks were sharp as blades. Failure. The phrase kept repeating in my head. Our family is ashamed of this individual. She destroyed her father's life and deceived us. I'm very sorry we have to have someone like her in our midst. There was silence in the room. I sensed their looks. Disgust, pity, curiosity. Trapped in the maelstrom of judgment, I stood there. My father really felt this way. At first, he appeared unconcerned. Perhaps, however, that was all part of his scheme, and now he had made me seem bad in front of everyone. As though I had already been erased, he carried on with his remarks as like nothing had occurred. And gradually, the audience turned its focus back to his well-crafted remarks and away from me. Silently, I turned and headed for the door. There was no point in remaining. It was evident from his statements that our relationship could not be saved. However, I heard someone cry out to me just before I got to the doors. My father's business president, Franklin, was there. He had always been friendly to me and had known me when I was a young child. Tracy, have you got a moment? I gave a little nod. He guided me to a peaceful area of the corridor. I heard what your dad had to say. He was careful with his word choice. However, I am aware of your true nature. Your father might not. However, I do. Confused, I scowled. What was he discussing? I take it that you are a Harvard professor of constitutional law. Stunned, I gazed at him. How is he aware that my son was enrolled in law school? He frequently mentions you. Well, Professor Teagle, you're famous. I requested him to show me a photo after recognizing the name. I realized right away that I couldn't speak. I never thought anyone in this tiny town would actually recognize me. Now why don't you speak the truth? Frank held my arm tenderly while he talked. Your father should be aware of your true identity. You don't need to wait till tomorrow. Tracy, you've endured enough suffering for 15 years, yet I hesitated. You no longer have to bear this miscommunication. I took a big breath after hearing his comments, which gave me the boost I needed. Perhaps it was time to come out of hiding. My father had rejected me, and my family had left me. I didn't have to minimize my value, though. I had spent the previous 15 years working nonstop. I looked back toward the corridor. My father stood with everyone around him still grinning and soaking in the praise. I plucked up all my bravery and started to approach him. Dad? My voice reverberated throughout the corridor. His grin dimmed. Everyone around us stopped talking. Are you still present? I assumed you were gone. Cold, he said. You mentioned me. With a quivering voice, I spoke. I was considered a failure by you. Yes, exactly. You are this family's embarrassment. Without hesitation, he said. Once more, the crowd whispered. People started to swarm around us. Frank moved forward to stand next to me. Calm but forceful, he said, Thomas. The truth is, you have no idea who your daughter is. Do you? Frank, what are you talking about? My dad frowned. Your daughter teaches at Harvard University as a professor. She is a nationally renowned constitutional law specialist. The hall was filled with a startled hush. My dad's face became white. My mom gave a little gasp. My father murmured, "That's absurd. This youngster cannot possibly be a Harvard professor. You must be wrong." Frank turned to face me and replied, "I'm not mistaken." "Would you show him Tracy?" I took out my business card, which had a clear print from my purse. Harvard University constitutional law professor Dr. Tracy Gale. My father took it from me. He accepted it with a trembling hand. "This," he continued, "this must be fake," but his voice was no longer convincing. My phone came out, and I went to the Harvard University website. It showed my faculty profile, credentials, biography, and photo. "Still don't you trust me?" Quietly, I asked. "I am a Harvard constitutional law professor. Across the nation, legal schools employ my research." My father, however, obstinately shook his head. He argued that this was a fabrication. A phony website may be created by anybody. A business card may be printed by anyone. From the audience, more whispers. The visitors began to feel confused and uneasy. Frank took another step forward. "What are you saying?" "Thomas, are you certain that this is a fake?" "It is, of course." My dad's voice came up. "She could never be a professor at Harvard. You're attempting to pull a prank on me, but I'm not going to fall for it." Guests looked at each other doubtfully. The scenario that was developing obviously unnerved them. Frank remained unflinching. "Thomas, your refusal to accept this is the only reason you are unable to do so. However, this is the reality. Your daughter is a professor at Harvard." "Quit talking!" My dad let out a shout. "You dare not tell me a lie!" Then a young man came forward from the rear of the room. It was the son of Frank. "Let me talk, Dad. She's my professor," he added. "No error exists." My dad's face lost all of its color. I spoke quietly while glancing at him. "Why do you find it so difficult to acknowledge my success?" Despite his lack of words, I could see the maelstrom of emotions churning beneath the surface of his eyes. With a voice that shook, "That can't be remarked, my father." I moved forward a step. "Do you think the evidence is phony? Does the truth frighten you?" His face twisted. "If you've truly developed into such a successful person." "What if so?" "It implies that I was mistaken. It indicates that my decision to leave you during that trial was a mistake." The hush in the room grew even more profound. The reality that he had concealed from himself was exposed by his confession. "When you testified 15 years ago, my main concern was defending my own viewpoint. I didn't want to think you were acting morally, because if I did," his voice broke. "In that case, I would have to acknowledge that I was the type of parent who discarded his daughter in order to preserve myself. I so persuaded myself that you were a failure and that you were mistaken. I may then continue to act like the victim?" My mom gave a little gasp. Kevin's expression was one of surprise as he stood still. "You will have achieved success if I acknowledge that you are a Harvard professor. What does it make me then, a stupid dad who attempted to ruin his daughter's future?" Silently, I listened. My father was now acknowledging the reality that had been hidden deep within of him. "I wanted you to fail. I could say I was correct if your life ended up being horrible. That my selfishness was justified, that I had made the right choice." Frank's tone was heard. "Thomas Grave, you feared she would succeed." "Yes, exactly. I was terrified that if Tracy was successful, everyone would see how ugly I am. I thus want her failure. When I labeled you a failure, he looked up at me. Not because I thought you were. The reason is that I needed you to be, to get away from my own guilt." Then, as though his legs were giving out, he fell into a chair. "What did I do?" The crowd started to realize the seriousness of what had just transpired as the truth finally set in. From the opposite side of the room, my mother hurried over. "Does it actually happen? Tracy? You teach at Harvard as a professor?" Yes, I replied softly. Mom. Kevin moved to face Tracy. We were unaware. To be honest, we had no idea. Didn't you attempt to find out? I answered, meeting his gaze directly. You all pretended that I didn't exist for 15 years. What I was doing didn't matter to you. You didn't even inquire. Everyone, Frank turned to them. One of the nation's top constitutional academics is Tracy. Significant court decisions have been impacted by her work. She has been accomplishing amazing things, but you were unaware of them. My father glanced up at last. Tracy, I apologize. Really. Is a mere apology sufficient, in your opinion? I got up gradually for 15 years. This family didn't see me. How agonizing was it? Do you know I held up my hand to stop my mother from taking a step in my direction? I'm not going to forgive everything just yet. I require time. Frank's voice was soft. I know how you feel, Tracy. Families, however, are not perfect. What they take away from them is what counts. I inhaled deeply. There was a thick quiet in the room. Nobody spoke. Then I said, Dad, I didn't live my life to please you. However, you must at least be aware of the reality. I'm not a failure. After saying that, I turned and left. As I went outdoors, the night air kissed my cheeks. There was a profound melancholy mixed with a sense of liberation. I was still unsure if my family's relationship would ever be restored. I had been back in Cambridge for a week. My relatives called and emailed me every single day. I first disregarded them, but as time went on, I saw that their communications started to take on a different tone. Tracy, my dad, was the first to apologize. I sincerely apologize for the incident that occurred the other day. I painted you as the bad guy for years in order to keep myself safe. I had no idea how much you had achieved, and my own presumptions caused me to damage you. I'm sincerely sorry for what I have done. My mother then made contact. This is Mom Tracy. I was unaware that you were a Harvard professor. We never even made an effort to learn what your life had devolved into. I now realize how much suffering you must have endured throughout the years. I'm so sorry. I even received a rare letter from Kevin Tracy. As a doctor, I have seen a lot of patients, but I have never once made an effort to comprehend my own family. We blamed you even though you did the right thing. I was unable to see your bravery for what it was. I apologize. I didn't immediately respond, though. I was unable to determine if their apologies were a sincere expression of sorrow or whether they were only a reaction to the shock of learning of my accomplishment. I wrote a brief response a week later. You have apologized to me. Even if I haven't harbored anger for the past 15 years, I can't go back in time to the way things were. I want us to think about if we can create a new form of partnership. I need some space for now. Tracy. My family's connection temporarily ceased after I sent the message. I was relieved and, surprisingly, a little lonely. A month or so later, Tracy received a call from Aunt Hillary. How are you? I'm doing okay. Hillary, too. I appreciate you checking in. In fact, I wanted to discuss your family with you. She spoke carefully. Kevin, your mother, and your father. All of them have begun attending therapy. I was taken aback. Therapy? Indeed. They had a lengthy conversation after that evening. At last, they understood how much they had wounded you. They've made the decision to get professional assistance because they want to change. Hillary, aunt, is that accurate? Yes, it is. The counselor explained to them how agonizing it must have been to be rejected for so long by your own family. Every time I heard Thomas cry during a session, a range of conflicting feelings surged in my chest. It was hard for me to picture my dad crying. However, they are not immediately requesting your forgiveness. They simply want to get back in touch on your terms, she continued. Perhaps you could start with baby steps if you're willing. I pondered for a while after I hung up if I could meet them halfway if they were genuinely attempting to change. Try at least. I wrote a brief email to my mother 2 months later. I've heard that you're attending counseling, Mom. That seems like a wise move. Please give me more time. I'm still processing my own emotions. Tracy, The following day, she responded, "Tracy, I appreciate you writing. We won't hurry you. We genuinely wish to make a change. I hope we can reunite as a true family one day." We then started sending each other brief texts roughly once a month. My dad emailed me updates about his job. My mom told me tidbits of her everyday life. Kevin wrote about his medical experiences. There was no longer any coldness or animosity, but the material was still very superficial. They were really trying, and I could tell. I called the family for the first time 2 months later. Tracy was picked up by my mother. Her voice became joyful. "Mom, how are you? I'm doing all okay. My perspective has improved as a result of counseling. How foolish we were to treat you in that manner." Our conversation lasted about an hour. She informed me about their therapy sessions and how much my father and Kevin had learned to think about what they had done. "Someday, I hope we can all get together and have a meaningful conversation." I said, "Really?" Her voice faltered. "Are you saying that you'll pardon us? I'd like to attempt restoring trust, but not quite yet. Gradually." While I was still working at the university 6 months later, I made a crucial choice. I started a new initiative, a program to help youngsters from disadvantaged backgrounds. It was a program created to provide mentorship and scholarships to students who wanted to go to law school but had to give up their aspirations because of financial difficulties. Professor Susan, one of my colleagues, glowed when I brought up the concept. "That's amazing." However, why this suddenly, I hesitated before responding. Because I understand what it's like to feel totally alone and misunderstood. Additionally, I want to help children who are in that similar situation. Through this endeavor, your story is turning into someone else's strength. I got to know a lot of young individuals. Some were bearing the burden of suffering from family that were unable or unwilling to comprehend them. I told them that how other people see them doesn't determine their value. I'm still thinking about my own family now. Although I can appreciate their attempt to improve, I still can't forgive them completely. How will the connection develop in the future? I'm not sure yet. However, I no longer harbor resentment or anger. Time does heal sometimes. I continue to work with my pupils in my office every day while keeping that in mind. Story 3. Brandon is my name. My age is 34. And I've been the one behind the curtain for as long as I can remember. While my family grinned for the pictures, I was discreetly pulling the threads, arranging, paying, repairing, and smoothing things out. That's not what I say to sound honorable. It's simply the way it has always been. I was the planner, the trustworthy one, and the responsible one. I was already assisting my younger siblings with their homework and making appointments for my mom's doctor's visits when I was 12. Dad used to call me the glue and give me a pat on the back, but glue never gets a thank you. Until it cracks, it merely keeps everything together. This year was Dad's 65th birthday. A significant amount. Retirement, Medicare, everything. I assumed that I would go all out every time he expressed his desire to travel to the Caribbean, a bright, sunny place with unending buffets and crystal clear water. 6 months before the trip, I began organizing it. I looked into shore excursions rooms and cruise lines in order to get a personalized cake with the words, "Happy 65th Captain Kin," inscribed in gold icing. I even worked with the ship's events manager. I spent a total of $10,200 on the vacation. I remained still. I did this for my father. Not only for him either. It was for everyone in the family. For my parents, I reserved cottages. Kevin, my younger brother, and his spouse. Myself, my sister Gina, and Lisa, her girlfriend. There are 7 of us. I ensured that everyone had a paid itinerary and a private balcony. Scuba diving in St. Thomas. San Juan zip line. In Barbados, sampling rum. Everything. I even created custom baggage tags. I was reviewing my packing list at my work 3 days prior to the vacation. It was a group text from Gina when my phone died. "Just so you know, Brandon, we gave Lisa your cottage instead. According to Dad, she makes him laugh more and he wants to spend the trip with her. I hope that's cool." I read it again after blinking at the screen. To be sure I hadn't missed a joke, I scrolled higher. Perhaps they were planning a surprise and this was part of it. Not at all. Kevin's response was, LOL, classic dad. Lisa used a heart emoji in response. Nobody spoke to me. Nobody inquired about my feelings about relinquishing the place I had paid for. Nobody even bothered to express gratitude. They treated me like a stray extra who had gone off to their holiday, bumping my hotel, my trip, and my card. For a while, I just sat there. Not upset, not quite yet. Mostly in a state of shock. You are familiar with the constricted sensation behind your eyelids, similar to the buildup to a storm. That was how it felt. The realization that this was nothing new came slowly and bitterly. It was only the priciest iteration of an ancient design. They constantly took, and I always gave. Lisa had more humor. Lisa was more entertaining. Lisa was nearer to me and the family. The organizer was me. The backup plan, the wallet. I took a good look at the message before responding. Make a copy of that. I only stated that. Not cool, not okay. 2 terms with a wide range of meanings. They didn't inquire further. I poured myself some whiskey that evening. I turned on my laptop and signed into all of the reservation portals that were available to me. The group airport transfer, the cake seller, the cruise line, and even the private island tour. I canceled all of them and made arrangements to send everyone to the port. The problem with being the planner, the fixer, and the glue is this. Everything was in my name, including the booking confirmation and the password. 3 to 24 a.m. Gina sent me an SMS. Hello, just making sure. Has the snorkeling trip been canceled? The app does not display it. I didn't respond. Kevin added, Bro, why does the cruise booking say no active reservation at 4:11 a.m.? What's happening? Didn't respond yet. 6 a.m. My mother called. I let it to ring. After that, I switched off my phone and took a stroll. While some repercussions was to be expected, what transpired next was a cascade. It seems that my parents had previously discussed the cruise with all of their acquaintances. Both Gina and Kevin had taken time off from their jobs. They had set up automated light timers, dog sitters, and daycare. For the trip, Lisa reportedly purchased a whole new beach attire, tagging it on Instagram with the hashtag #CruiseQueen. And now nothing. Don't travel, not a cake, no beach. Even their enhanced drink packages were canceled by me. However, it wasn't the end. The satisfying part wasn't even that. Because I was organizing my own sea for the last few years while they were rushing, contacting support, ranting with customer service representatives, and trying to rebook at the last minute, only to discover that everything was either sold out or quadruple the price. In a house I owned, my parents had been living for free. I inherited the house from my grandpa, so technically it was still in my name. It made sense, so I'd let them remain there. They were mortgage-free. I didn't require the location, and I felt like a good son because of it. The once I saw that sentence, everything changed. I thus got in touch with a property management business, scheduled a thorough inspection, and delivered a formal notice of tenancy termination. 3 days later, the locks were replaced. The utility accounts no longer included their name. They were utilizing a shared Verizon family plan that I terminated under my name. Their storage unit, of course, paid until the end of the month before being scheduled for removal. I didn't yell. It wasn't a dramatic email that I wrote. I just relocated each component individually. The worst part is that they didn't even know the trip was canceled until the day before their scheduled departure. They arrived at the harbor wearing similar t-shirts that read, Dad's 65th ship happens, smiling and carrying luggage. However, no check-in was made. No reservations, no cabin, not a cake, no. Brandon, that only served as the warm-up. It was already too late when they recognized what had transpired. Since I started receiving calls once more, I am aware of this. Not messages, voicemails and calls from confused and desperate people. Some are enraged, while some are only begging. It appears that there has been some sort of error, Brandon honey. The first message came through with Mom's voice crackling. We're not on the list, the cruise line claims. Would you please give them a call? You made all the reservations correct, Kevin again. All okay, man. Not amusing. As if we understand. You're angry. Lisa's statements were meaningless. Give me a call. Let's make this right. There was no voicemail from Gina. She just made 7 consecutive calls. Lisa. For the first time in weeks, she sent me a message. Actually, Brandon, I know we started off badly, but this is a huge event for your dad. Don't spoil his special day. Over a misunderstanding. Before I clicked, I watched her message go unread for an hour. Observed. Since it wasn't about the trip at that point, rather, it was about every family portrait I took for them and being instructed to stand behind the camera, I didn't respond. All of them. I appreciate your planning. Every Christmas I spent cleaning dishes I never received. Every Brandon will take care of things, treating me like a live assistant while the joy was watching football, rather than their son, their sibling. I had given them the benefit of the doubt for years, telling myself that they loved me, that they were only in the moment, and that they didn't mean it. Simply didn't convey it in the same manner. However, I paid for and handed it to Lisa with a nonchalant, "She makes Dad laugh more," after they stole my room, which was my actual wager on the trip. I realized then that they still remembered me. They simply didn't believe that I was important. Then they were outdoors now. Literally. Because they returned to the house I used to let them reside in 3 days after the disastrous cruise and were unable to enter. With my car parked across the street, my windows tinted, and my sunglasses on, I watched. I wanted to see it because I needed it to feel real, not because I was cruel. For once. I wanted them to experience the same sense of exclusion I did. Not welcome. The handle was first tried by a small mother, then the subsequent doorbell, fumbling with his keys. The previous evening, I had had my locks changed. Once more they rang. I was knocked. I saw the bewilderment turn to annoyance, then to fear. Kevin took his phone out. I could infer what he observed. Due to non-payment and unauthorized subletting, they were given 30 days to leave the property by a forwarded legal notice that I had printed and emailed. Technically true thanks to Lisa crashing there without notice a few weeks prior. Gina stormed to the side of the house and tried the back door. I'd had that reinforced too. Eventually, they noticed the neighbor watching the same neighborhood once asked me why I never came to the barbecues, then laughed when I said I wasn't invited. She gave me a nod as I drove off that afternoon. The texts turned angrier after that. You had to know, right? Where are we supposed to go, Brandon? This is insane. You're acting like a stranger. Lisa's post about the cruise quietly disappeared from her feed. Then the real unraveling began. Dad's old business partner texted me to ask why the emergency fund wasn't responding to payment requests. Turns out my name was still attached as cosigner. Another thing I'd been too helpful to change. So I did. I moved the money to a trust under my name. Legal, clean. I even called to confirm there was no breach of contract. There wasn't. Next came the streaming services. Netflix, Hulu, Spotify. Family plan all canceled. Passwords changed. Email logins locked. A week later, I got a call from Mom. I stared at it, didn't answer. Then another voicemail. She sounded tired. Smaller. Brandon, we don't know what to do. Your dad's sleeping on Kevin's couch and Jenny's staying with friends. I know you're angry, but this is your family. We're not perfect, but we love you. Can we please just talk? I sat on my couch, surrounded by silence. No laughter, no noise, no obligation. Just tranquility. And then I got another message from Jenna this time. No greeting, no apology. Just, are you seriously going to throw away your entire family over a joke? That's when something shifted in me. Because it wasn't just a joke. It was a summary. A distillation of every moment I'd been told I was less than every time they pushed me aside. I then acted shocked when I didn't stick around to pick up the pieces. I thought about replying. Instead, I started writing something else. Not to them, to the lawyer. Because this wasn't just a vacation anymore. This was a full reset. And they hadn't even seen the worst part yet. I didn't reply to Jenny's message. I didn't need to. I was already several steps ahead, drafting documents with my attorney to formalize what had already begun. A clean separation. Emotionally, financially, legally. There was no major encounter, no shouting match. I didn't hurl dishes or yell that I was done, since I had been done softly, gently, in the manner. You stop watering a plant not out of malice, but because you understand it was never yours to take care of in the first place. The lawyer's office was a tiny spot situated between a bakery and a tailor shop downtown. Nothing spectacular, but it felt decisive. We met in person. I brought a list carefully written, cross-referenced. My name was still on, more than I realized. My parents' health insurance copay account. A line of credit they'd been utilizing for years in case of crises. The registration on the family automobile remained in my name from when I helped refinance it 5 years ago. I ordered the lawyer to transfer, revoke, dissolve, or close everything, whichever would remove the relationships fastest. And that storage unit, I had it open. I didn't discard anything. I'm not that individual. However, because Dad was staying at Kevin's, I paid movers to have everything packed up and sent there. On top of the boxes, the invoice was taped. At this point, the message's tone changed once again. They had lost their anger. They didn't understand. I was hurt. It's almost theatrical. This isn't you, Brandon. Could we just take a seat like grown-ups? You're taking revenge. Hateful. That one stayed with me. I nearly burst out laughing at the irony, because I had always been understanding, forgiving, and accommodating for 34 years. Kevin destroyed his car and required a trip from the police station by himself, so I missed my college graduation. Jen, rent money twice without ever requesting reimbursement. In an attempt to cheer them up following Dad's operation last fall, I sent Mom and Dad to Vermont. I did it for no recognition. I think that's what family was meant to be, therefore I did it. However, they didn't. Not at all. My generosity wasn't love to them. It was inventory. A resource is anything that can be distributed, utilized, assumed. The day I discovered the voicemail made that very obvious. I hadn't spoken to that person in years. Uncle Denise, the younger brother of my dad, he got into a fight with his father about a little matter. Dennis never paid back the money he borrowed, according to Dad. Dad lied about a loan, Dennis said. That never took place. Who can tell the truth? But I nearly didn't respond when Dennis called me out of the blue. He sounded lower than I had recalled, slower, as if each syllable had to be drawn from the depths. I don't want to interfere, but I believe you ought to be aware, Brandon. The other day, your mom left a message on your aunt's phone. I was unaware that it was still recording. She was ranting about you, saying that this whole situation is simply another instance of your constant pretense of superiority. Said that you're punishing them because you can't bear to see other people happy and that you've never understood what it takes to make sacrifices. He hesitated. I wanted to share it with you. I said very little. I just thanked him. I hung up and sat in quiet, although I told him I appreciated the call. Not even the words were painful. It was the affirmation. The knowledge that after everything they were still blind to their mistakes. They continued to portray themselves as the victims in a narrative that I had no desire to create. The next day, I revised my will, took all of my family members off of the beneficiaries list, and established a new trust that would fund first-generation college student scholarships. Silently, there are no structures or plaques bearing my name. Just something practical, something tangible. I changed my phone number the same week. New carrier, new account, new phone. Only my best buddy Sam, my lawyer, and my assistant were given the number. It was Sam who brought 2 six-packs and a bag of tacos over that evening. He remained silent, asked if I wanted to watch something that wasn't about family, and then offered me a drink. We watched an outdated action film with predictable explosions and awful dialogue. It was flawless. The knock on my door came at that moment. I had no expectations, no deliveries, no appointments. I went to check on the people while you did the TV, Sam. Jenna was the one. Hair secured, She has dark circles beneath her eyes. She held her phone tightly in one hand. In the other was what appeared to be a folder. She didn't appear upset. She appeared exhausted. The door was not opened by me. Softer this time, she knocked. "I just want to talk, Brandon." I stood behind the door and watched her, not talking, not moving. Then she said it. "It has to do with Dad." Something took place. A gentle knock again, then a softer one. In Kevin's backyard, he fell off a ladder. He's okay. Bruised ribs and a sprained wrist. He's afraid, though. He's requesting you. I remained silent, not by way of the door, not in my mind. I wasn't cold in my silence. Clarity was the key. I was no longer the anxious, eager-to-please son. I didn't feel guilt surging up or some compulsion to rush to his side and fix everything. I just felt curious. I was wondering what angle this was. Curious if they still thought this was a game of leverage. "I know we messed up," Jenna said after a long pause. "I know you don't trust us. Maybe you never should have. But he's asking for you, Brandon. Not Kevin, not even Lisa. You." I finally opened the door. Not because she said the right thing, but because I was ready to look her in the eye. And when I did, I saw it. Not manipulation, not a properly rehearsed script, just fatigue, and maybe a shard of comprehension. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her voice, when she spoke again, was rough. He stated he wanted to apologize. I gave a nod. "So let him." She seemed bewildered. "To you, Brandon? Not in a group SMS, not through me. To you." I went outside and slammed the door behind me. Didn't ask her inside. She gave me the folder after we stood on the porch for a minute. I opened it. A note in Dad's blocky, uneven handwriting was inside. It was brief. "I'm not very good at saying the correct words, Brandon. Not at all. I am aware that I have relied too much on you. Too much was expected. I also realized that I never truly gave you the gratitude I deserved. The slack was always taken by you, and by pretending it didn't matter, I made it worse. I allowed others to belittle you. I occasionally joined in. I'm responsible for it. I apologize. None of it was fair to you. I hope you're content right now. Dad, you deserve to be." I waited to feel anything as I stood there reading it again. Anger, verification, sadness, but I just sensed the reality of it. Although it wasn't flawless, the apology was sincere. Jenna gave me a glance. "Did you decide not to call?" Claimed that he assumed you would hang up if he phoned, block him if he texted you. She was not mistaken. She went on, "I'm not here to guilt you. I wanted to let you know that he's making an effort." I gave a nod, gave the folder back, closing it. "Inform him I received the letter. Would you like to know?" Slowly, she nodded once more. Also, for the first time in a long time, she didn't dispute. "Okay," she responded simply, and made her way back to her vehicle. The following day, I saw her drive away. I mailed Kevin a little package. There was a Post-it note and a laminated copy of the letter. "I appreciate the letter. We're through, but I accept your apologies. Be careful." I didn't require anything more. I would not return. I didn't require any staged forgiveness, arc, a tearful reunion, or a dramatic confrontation. I had no desire to gradually reintegrate them into my life one text at a time. The chapter was closed. I choose to spend the ensuing months creating something greater instead. I formally opened the scholarship fund I had established and named it after my grandpa, who bequeathed me the dramatizing mansion. I paid for the first 3 students' debt-free community college educations. We met and spoke with them, provided them with the type of assistance I wish I had received when I was their age. I had always wanted to visit Portugal, but I kept putting it off till later, so Sam and I did just that. For the first time in decades, I felt as I stood on the cliffs overlooking the ocean, as if I were no longer holding my breath. I sold the family home at a respectable profit and used the proceeds to invest in a small nonprofit incubator for first-generation business owners. I also purchased a tiny condo in the city. None of it was aired by me. Didn't publish anything online. I kept my family in the dark. After the voyage, I only lived for a year or so. That never took place. A letter arrived in the mail. No address for return. There was a picture of a photo dad with a cast on his chair arm, grinning clumsily at the rear camera. "We still speak about you," it stated. "Lisa finally learned how to make the stew you enjoyed. She always burns it. I figured you'd like that." "All right," I grinned, but didn't answer. There was no closure. Those words must also be definitive. Freedom was what I received. Freedom from constantly being the fixer and the helper. The emotional trash can. Freedom to decide who may and cannot access me. I never lost interest in them. I just stopped allowing them to treat me like a disposable object. They can accept the repercussions. At last, I began life according to my own terms.